It's Friday, and it's time for the next in our series, Fanzine Friday. Today we're taking a look at the Underworld Oracle number 6 from August of 1978. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and this is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on Fanzine Friday, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. This week, that's the Underworld Oracle number 6 by Lou Nisbet from August of 1978. We hope you enjoy today's video. So I'm really excited to talk about Underworld Oracle number 6, Lou Nisbet and Phil Alexander. This one starts off great right with the cover. It's a wraparound art that goes front to back. We'll take a closer look at that here in just a second. This is the next to the last, I believe, next to the last issue of Underworld Oracle. It's the last one I have, so we'll move on to something new next week. Here's that cover, and here's the back page of the wraparound art, and let me lean out of the way. Here's the whole thing put together. You've got this warrior here on some ostrich-looking mount, and you can see there's some other ones there, and the whole battle scene. Somebody's a couple dragons up in the sky. It's just a really fun one. It's my favorite Phil Alexander cover in Underworld Oracle for sure. Here's the editorial page, and as you may have noticed last time, they've sort of come up with this eye with the cloak over it as a symbol for the Oracle. His comments here basically talk about the delay. I think it took 4 months for this one to come out. The challenges, some of the reasons, lack of content, lack of time to get it together. Also some issues with his friend who does the publishing. And you see this a lot, right? The great ambitions, great product, but it's clearly a lot of work for these young folks to get these fanzines out on a consistent basis. And so when you see some of these that have been going on for a really long time, the last several years, always hit their monthly or bi-monthly schedule, it just shows you how impressive it is to be able to sustain that level of high quality content over a long period of time. He has a table of contents here, and I'll show you mine in just a second. The other thing he mentions is he's always looking for feedback on what people like, because they said they were going to cancel the halls of testing, and then he says lots of people wrote in and said they really liked them, and so they say, next issue we'll try to take that up again. Here's our table of contents. The editorial, a new character class called the Tumbler, which is an awful lot like the Thief Acrobat we see in Unearthed Arcana from TSR in a few years. Some new monsters. Ed Simbalist, who's a creator of Chivalry Sorcery, had written to them a couple of times, and they got permission. They published some of his letters that he's written at a great length, several pages in here. There's a wilderness setting called the Forests of the Urupari. That's from Tom Keen's, and it serves as a setting for more than one adventure, and we'll talk about that in a second. Then the other thing that Ed had said was he meant to have a character sheet in with the game, and he didn't. And so there's the middle page you can pull out and photocopy and get a copy of a Chivalry and Sorcery character sheet. So then we have 2 adventures this time. The Crypt of Kakama, which is by Tom Keen's, and then El Praetor, which is by Clifford Haley. And we'll talk about those. Meanwhile, which is an article about magic items that are worthless. He says, why are all these magic items always so cool and powerful? Why aren't there enchanted things that just do boring stuff? Which I take that to some extent. He takes it to extreme. These are just sort of gonzo silly things. He says, I've got a ring of earth walking and a wand of wall paralysis, and I personally don't care for that in my kind of campaign, but maybe you do. Another article, this is more of a realistic rules kind of thing, love and marriage. I never saw the point of trying to deal with that in my campaigns, but if you do, this guy talks about it. He does it through charts and die rolls, chances of falling in love and chances of the other person falling in love with you and stuff like that. If you want that in your campaign, I guess that might be an interesting article. Potions Perilous, which is a really good article that talks about, and I think he probably had this issue in his campaign, people who are like chugging potions, like super, 4 or 5 potions at a time to get all buffed up. And so, and you see that in the DMG as well. Gary had something to say about that. But so he's got this concept of potions sort of enchant you, but there's a cost to your body, and so you need to rest after one potion. And so if you take more than one potion in a day or before you rest, you've got to roll to see if there's an adverse effect, which could be anything from needing to rest and sort of having the effects of a slow spell for some period of time. Then if you take a second, third potion, the chances go higher of some ill effects. If you have a second potion in your system at the same time, for every second, third, fourth potion, there's a chance of something really bad happening as they interact with each other. Anything from neither potion works to only one potion works to ill effects. And that goes up the more potions you take, including at the extreme, you could end up dying in a coma, having some type of adverse permanent effect, and he has a little chart for several ones about what the permanent effect might be. All in all, it's not so much that the article itself is perfect, but the idea is a good one, especially if I've never had that where guys were taking 4 or 5 potions at a time trying to get buffed up, but I guess it could happen, and if it did, this is an interesting idea of how you deal with that. And then the contacts at the back, which are ways for people to get in touch with each other if they want to communicate. So our contributors, we have Lou and Phil, of course. I mentioned Ed, Allie, who helps draw some of the dungeons, and then Tom, who's contributed some of the adventures, as has Clifford, and then John Norris. Okay, so first we have the Tumbler. As I mentioned, it's a new character class. It's quite well done. It's really someone who, for the most part, is trying to avoid combat, but also has some interesting, tumbling effects where they can try to sort of roll past someone, get behind them for an attack and stuff like that in combat. I'm not sure how much this character would really be fun to play in a campaign, especially if you have lots of combat, but it's an interesting idea, as I said, and I thought it was really interesting to read this and compare it to the Unearthed Arcana Thief Acrobat that comes along from Gary Gygax a bit later. New monsters. You know what I say, you can never have too many. So the art here is by Tom Keynes, and I think Allie contributes the first one, which is called the Fear Monster, which is the guy with the horns on his head here. And it appears and strikes fear into people. The next one down below, the Charuva, I believe, and that is essentially a snake-like being with a humanoid head. It's a lot like a Naga, I think, in some respects. And they have certain spell abilities. The Hukuvus, or Huluva, Hukuvus or Huluva, and that shows up later, I believe, in the Fiend Folio, is another undead creature. In this iteration, they can polymorph itself 3 times a day, only hit by magic silver weapons. And if they touch you, you get the effects of a yellow fever spell, and you'll need a cleric to heal you for that or cure that disease. And of course, they can be turned like undead. And then we have this great one right here in the middle called the Big Head, which is a big furry head with claws, and they have these little arms, and they can attack you. And I thought they were pretty fun. And then another one I think that shows up in the Fiend Folio is the Tengu, and these are the small creatures on either side of this guy that are attacking him. They say they're like sprite-like creatures with wings that can come along, and they can either they suggest in the campaign, they could be something you fight, but they could also be something under some circumstances that maybe decide to guard one of your characters and come with them. And so they're, again, a good little monster for your campaign. I think it's really interesting to see these monsters that show up later in some of the books showing up here first. I didn't know their origin until I read these fanzines. Okay, so the Force of the Euripari, and it talks about this force encounter, and here's the map that he has. And what I think is kind of cool here is he takes this map and lays out multiple adventures on it. And so you actually have the Pyramid of Qualpatal, which is from Underworld Oracle number 1 on the left. In the middle, we've got the Crypt of Kakama, and on the right, we've got El Praetor. I really like Tom Keen's adventure. It's called the Crypt of Kakama. It's 4 levels. It's pretty small. I mean, I like this idea that it's, in some respects, I think more realistic of what this would look like, right? Not like we used to do and take a piece of graph paper and fill the whole thing. just a few rooms on each level. For the most part, I thought this one was pretty believable in terms of what type of monsters and encounters you find in here. I thought it was really well done, a lot of fun. You can look at it and see it's probably just a one-session adventure, unless people get really bogged down in it. And then the second adventure from Cliff Haley is called El Praetor. And so the first one, which is obviously a tomb, this one is the typical idea where you have a mage who has created the menagerie, right? He's just brought all these random things into his lair, which is how is a way to get around explaining why are all these random things just stuck in rooms, right? It says he's dead, and so you might go there. I mean, I think to make it realistic, because all these things are pretty much still here, I would probably start this campaign with saying he's just died, and so your characters want to rush there before anyone else does to try and find his treasure, which is still here, and that would explain why all these creatures are still there, even though the wizard who brought them there and held them there is gone. It's a pretty good dungeon. It's probably a couple sessions, because there's going to be a lot of combat, because there's a lot of stuff in here, in addition to some good tricks and traps. And that's it for Underworld Oracle. Kind of short and sweet on this edition, but it's a really good one. I really like the 2 adventures that are in there, and I hope you guys have been enjoying the series. I hope you enjoyed all the discussion of the Underworld Oracle. It's another great fanzine, and I'm really looking forward to starting something new with y'all next week. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.